Jai Shri Krishna. When one looks at society, one has two ways of measuring it: materiality or spirituality. You can measure a person materially or spiritually. When you use the word materiality, you look at what one possesses. Who has what? How big is his house? How much one possesses and what one has becomes important in materiality. Nowadays, people are measured by what they have and not who they are. Every individual wants to prove himself, in front of himself first, in front of his family second, in front of his society or group, for example, relatives, friends, acquaintances third, and finally, in front of the world at large. When each person tries to prove themselves, all they see is, and all they look for in another person, is what that person has got. When the only measure of a person is what he possesses, and every person is trying to prove themselves, there is only one road left to take. I'll keep gathering what I can. Then the world will respect me. Then the world will adore me. Materiality is everyone trying to prove that they're something. Because they have to gather things in order to prove that they're something, they run after objects. The person running after objects knows that there's nothing in those objects. There are people who own many objects. There are piles and piles of things, but within there is something empty and there's something missing from their lives. Once you have an affluence of objects, then they become worthless. For example, when you have 10 cars and the 11th car comes, it doesn't make a difference. Why do people then still run after objects? They're not running for themselves, but for other people. So they just become emptier and emptier, and in their heart there is a feeling of sadness. A few years back, people decided that if we gather these things, then we'll be happy. But now they have those things, and yet there's still a deficiency. When one is sad because they don't have the objects that they want, then that is a very shallow unhappiness. When one is sad, for example, when they're hungry, then you hand them food and the sadness will go away. But what about the sadness when one's stomach is filled? This sadness is a very deep sadness. Today, fast progress has been beneficial in many ways. 50 years ago, happiness was not as easily available as this. In between all these happy moments, what will I do when I'm sad? There is an ocean of happiness nowadays, and the island on which a person is sitting is one of sadness. And every now and then, one has to come back to the island. When you go to swim in the ocean, you may swim for 1 or 2 hours, but you have to come back to the island. You cannot keep swimming in the ocean because you're a person and not a fish. And whenever a person comes back to the island, the sadness becomes unbearable. Society has been described by economists as a split between haves and have-nots. But there's a third type of person, have-nots in spite of being haves. They have everything and yet still experience not having. This is a major sadness of today, caused by the predominance of materiality and a forgetting of spirituality. That is why we need spirituality today, and that is why we need the Bhagavad Gita today. Because when you measure someone by the way of spirituality, what you have is not important, but what you are is important. Who are you? Having does not become important, but being becomes important. In spirituality, you look inwards and not outwards for your well-being. The Gita shows us the true power, the true bliss, and true wisdom that we have inside ourselves, and that realization of being is wonderful. Jai Shri Krishna.